Welcome to Sausage on a Fork, a podcast dedicated to the UK's longest running children's drama programme, Grange Hill. My name's Neil, and in each episode I'll interview a former cast member about their life before, during and after their time on the programme. Okay, welcome to the latest episode of Sausage on a Fork, and I am absolutely delighted to say that I have been joined for this episode by none other than Tracey Murphy, who played Claire Sullivan. Tracey, welcome to Sausage on a Fork.
Thank you, Neil. It's a pleasure to be with you.
Well, thank you for coming on. Okay, what we'll do then, Tracey, is we'll start this episode the way we start every episode. And if you could tell us how you first got into acting.
Well, it's sort of by chance in the respect of my parents sort of worked full time, so I always had to go to some form of after school activity. So at the age of 8, I finally got a place at the Anna Scher Theatre.
Right.
So obviously, quite a few cast members came from the Anna Scher Theatre through the years, and ultimately, I wasn't a natural sort of show person or anything. And, being drilled into Anna, from Anna herself was that, there's no such word as S and F, which is star and fame. Yeah. It was all about being real people. And I was a very shy 8-year-old who used to blush if anyone spoke to me that I didn't know. So I started my journey at 8. I probably didn't get my first job until I was about 12 years old, which was in EastEnders, which was only like one episode, sort of a bit part in that. And then I was very lucky, obviously, to be on the casting card and have the agent with Anna Scher's. And I was lucky to get the job with Grange Hill when I was 16.
Great.
So, very fortunate. And I wouldn't say that I was a natural sort of, as I say, I wasn't somebody that was looking to get onto TV or do anything like that. It was purely, and one of the things I loved about Anna Scher's was the fact that it was the continuity, because I started in primary school and, I still see many people from, them because they sort of transitioned with me through all the stages of school, transitioned with me through all the sort of stages of my teenage years, my formative years.
Yeah. But, you just said there, so you started when you were 8 and you didn't get your first job till you were 12. But is there much like pressure when you're doing that and you're not getting work if you see these people who are? Was there ever anything like that?
Not really, because Anna Scher's sort of ethos was that basically we were real people, we were just us, and it's not a stage school by any means. I think when I first started there, classes after school was something like £2.
Right.
So again, when you put it on the scale of what some people will pay to even get on an agent, but there wasn't any pressure. Certainly it was fun. It was about, being with people of all different ages, because that was one of the good things as well. You obviously had the primary schools, but you could have 5-6-year-olds in your class up to the age of 11, or 11-year-olds up to the age of 16, and then you go into the adult class, and that's even vaster age groups. Yeah. So no, there was no pressure at all, and we all just enjoyed doing sort of improv and putting together plays and things. So no pressure whatsoever.
Brilliant.
You got on the agency. And then you'd start going up for castings. But for me personally, I didn't feel pressure. Whether anyone else did, I don't know.
And who were you at Anna Scher's with? Anyone who we might know, like?
What, from Grange Hill?
Or Grange Hill, or the wider world, like?
Well, Stephen and Laura Hammett were obviously with me from Grange Hill. Melanie, but I mean, there's loads of people that obviously have gone on to do amazing things and still acting, and I'm in awe of the fact that I even knew them. But as I say, gosh, I'm trying to think of who would be of interest. Well, I suppose Naomi Harris. Obviously, she's a big Hollywood star. You've got Zoe Ashton. You've got people in EastEnders, Patsy Palmer, Natalie Cassidy. It was, when you look at it now, and it's quite weird actually, because for me, obviously I grew up in London, and when I had children and things, I moved out of London, and I forget actually that it's like my life is in two halves
Right.
because people that are like all my close friends now actually don't even know anything about that part of my life.
Yeah.
And it's only when I sort of, I don't know, you end up sort of meeting up with people. They're like, oh my God, that's so-and-so. And I was like, oh gosh, yeah, sorry. How do you know them? So it is quite, it's a very fortunate, I feel very fortunate to have been part of sort of that journey. And, some of them have got some people that I obviously worked with and stuff have gone on to do absolutely amazing things.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, like, well, one of the questions I always ask is like, what was it like sort of like going into Grange Hill? But what was it like going into Anna Shares? And then there's people there who might not necessarily have been in Grange Hill, but like there's people there who you see on the telly, or, that there's such and such. Was that weird, or like, was it just, did you just take it in your stride?
I think obviously human nature, when you see somebody that you recognize and you're like, oh my God, you do have that, that motion. That's just human nature. But so, it was basically it disintegrated very, very quickly because, Anna was very good at putting us all on one level, and, ultimately we were all the same. Do you know what I mean? It didn't matter that we'd just done this or it was purely about coming together and, all treated the same, really. So, as I say, I didn't personally feel like, awestruck by somebody or, so.
Brilliant. Okay. So, all right, then. So we will talk about Grange Hill because obviously that's it. That's what we're here for. So you joined Grange Hill in series 20 as Claire Sullivan. 1997, that went on air there. So obviously this isn't a video podcast, but you want to see the face that Tracey's just pulled there when I said that. But yeah, so were you a fan of the programme?
Oh yes, I mean, who wasn't? I think it was iconic, wasn't it? And I think that's what makes Grange Hill so special, because it sort of transcends through the ages. My parents knew about Grange Hill. Oh my God, they were like just as excited about being in Grange Hill, and they only had to mention it to work colleagues and stuff like that, and it was like Grange Hill. Oh my, so 100% iconic. Can't get away from it, and the fact that we're talking about it still now just shows that it's transcended all generations and all the years. So
and like your route into the program, or like your character's route into the program was very, very different to what it would have normally have been, because we usually get a cohort start in the first year and we follow the way, which we did for the year group that Claire was in, but your character joined very, very late on. Claire joined in the sixth form.
Right.
And the very first scene that we see Claire in is when Dennis, who was a big character in the programme, Alan Cave. Alan Cave's a big supporter of the podcast. And we have to say it, he's the biggest reason you're on here, isn't he?
He is indeed. Obviously, he was like, Tracey, he got in contact with me. He said, you've got to get in contact with this Neil. Honestly, it's amazing. So yes, Alan Cave has lots to answer for me being here today.
So it was that weird time in the 90s when schools weren't just getting used for schools. They'd be getting, halls were getting hired out left, right and centre. And that's what happened in Grange Hill. The school was getting used like a function for, like, I don't know, a businessman or so. It was a conference or something. It was. I was trying to work it out. There was some kind of conference going on, and Dennis was working there helping with the catering and the cleaning, and Claire turned up looking for her boyfriend Gerald. And Gerald had been in a few episodes, but didn't at the same time really came to prominence the same time that Claire did as well, and we then found out that, Claire was a pupil at the school and that Gerald was her boyfriend. But I mean, to be honest, Gerald was, he was a bit of a tool, wasn't he? He was, I mean, I have to say, I am not talking about the actor here.
No, this lovely guy, so
Gerald
I
was he was
about the character.
yeah, no, he was a bit of a tool. He was quite pretentious, wasn't he? You know, he loved himself, like. And in that episode, we then see Claire ended up going shopping with Dennis to help him pick out some new clothes. And then, they got talking to each other. And she then told Dennis that, she'd known Gerald for years and he was her first boyfriend and still her only boyfriend at the time. And then at the same time, Dennis was going out with Lucy. And she asked him if he'd been with Lucy for long. And you start thinking that maybe Claire might possibly fancy Dennis a little bit. And then while they're out shopping, they get seen by a couple of the other girls from the sixth form, Lauren and Carleen, who then took great delight in telling Lucy that they'd seen Dennis and Claire out. Now, I have to say, because the sixth form, there was a lot of you in the sixth form at that point. Obviously, we've mentioned some of them there, but Dudley was there. I keep saying it. One of the greatest characters ever to have existed in Grange Hill, Dudley was. But, because you were all of that age, the 16, 17, and that time, did you all get on sort of really, really well? And who would you say were your best friends on the programme?
I mean, to be fair, because obviously I joined as an adult, so when you're over 16, you don't have to have a chaperone.
Yeah.
It tended to be that you were used early in the morning, first, and then they'd use all the school-aged kids during the day, and then you'd be used at the back end of the day. So you did have a lot of downtime together. Right. So naturally, when you're sort of, because I didn't live that close to L Street, so ultimately you do end up spending a lot of time with the characters, hanging around and stuff. So yeah, 100%, I would say we were all very good friends. I think I ended up outside of Grange Hill. I ended up spending time with a bit of Fiona Wade, but ultimately very, very close. Lorraine Woodley, who played Carly, and I knew obviously Melanie and Stephen Hammett, who played Dudley and Lauren. So, in that respect, I wouldn't say I had a best friend or was closer to particularly anyone, but probably spent more time outside of Grange Hill with Fiona.
Right. Okay. Cool.
Joanna, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. So that series was the series where Dennis had the accident on his bike, and the big the sixth form focus was all around that storyline, and we see Claire asked Dudley how Dennis was and if he'd been to see him yet, and when Dudley said he hadn't, this is where we first sort of get a I don't know. I was thinking it was your first big sort of monologue type thing where Claire starts telling Dudley off because they were supposed to be friends. And then there's a bit where you just mentioned Lorraine, who played Carleen. There's a bit where Claire then goes and has a chat with Carleen, or tries to have a chat with Carleen. And I couldn't get my head around it. She tries to have this chat with Carleen, who clearly doesn't want to know Claire. So Claire apologized to her and walked away. And when you see Carleen later on saying to Lauren, I had to have my breakfast with Claire, and you just think, what's everyone got against this girl? You know what I mean? All she's doing is trying to be nice. She doesn't know anyone. She's trying to fit in. But it was just horrible. I remember I was watching it when I was doing my research the other week, and I was thinking, this is horrible.
Probably some girl code, obviously. Maybe she was closer with Lucy, I don't know. But yeah, ultimately, yeah, she was mean.
And then there was a scene where Dudley and Josh were out playing pool, and Joanna and Claire turned up where they were playing pool. And Joanna told Claire that there was a bloke there that had been looking at her and giving her the eye. And Joanna then said she wouldn't tell Gerald if Claire did anything. And that's such just Joanna's character, wasn't it? Joanna for me was a character that a bit like Dudley. There hadn't been a character like that really in Grange Hill. Certainly there hadn't been one for a very long time. And Josh and Joanna then left the pool hall, and the lad who'd been looking over at Claire asked her to go to a party with him. And I think this your sort of your first big scene. He asked her to a party, and when she said no, all his mates came over, egging him on. The scene just turned really, really dark. And they were all telling him to go, go out with him, go to the party with him. And he was sitting on Claire's jacket and he wouldn't move. And in the end, one of the other lads told him to give her the jacket back. And so she ran outside and met and bumped into Dudley, who then walked her home. But when you're filming a scene like that, because it had gone from being sort of like the jovial, just playing pool, to going into that. Does the atmosphere change when you're filming like a difficult scene like that?
I think it is very much, it is a very fast turnover. So ultimately, we do rehearsals before we start filming, so it's all blocked and for cameras and things like that. But when you sort of turn up there, I wouldn't say the atmosphere changes, because I think that everybody there respects that everybody's trying to do a job. So everybody's very supportive. So I think perhaps that sort of storyline was to do with obviously the Joanna character and the sort of downward spiral that she was. So obviously it was sort of integrating that, I suppose, nice Claire probably wouldn't normally choose to be in an environment like that. And ultimately, that was sort of Joanna's sort of start of her decline, shall we say. But in terms of the atmosphere amongst the cast and stuff, I wouldn't say no, because we spent lots of time together, even like sort of the guys that sort of come in, I wouldn't say you know them very well, but they're there to do the job and do it very well. So
I was trying to remember what I'd seen that lad in, and he's in that episode of Only Fools and Horses where Batman and Robin, he's in that episode, isn't he? He's one of the muggers when Batman and Robin say. And do you know what? I was watching the thing, I've seen him in something quite a lot. And then I was lying in bed the other night and it came to me. He's one of the muggers in the Batman and Robin. Yeah. But I thought that was good. It was good because that was showing kids, what could happen, if you're not careful and if you do go out and you don't sort of stay, with your friends. Like it was one of those things that Grange Hill did really well, I think, We always say it showed real issues, didn't it? And it showed, and we often hear stories about where things have happened to people when they've been out with their friends and got separated and stuff like that. And I just thought it was really, really good for Grange Hill to be showing stuff like that.
It 100% was always on the edge, wasn't it? It was always pushing boundaries, and I think that's what made it transcendent and make it last and iconic, really.
Yeah, brilliant. Now, we've mentioned Gerald a few times already. There's a scene where Claire and Gerald go into a French lesson, and they were early to the lesson, and Gerald was speaking French. I'm guessing that he could speak. He was quite fluent in French anyway. Were you any good at French?
No. No way. Language is not my forte whatsoever.
No.
You die when you get your script and you're like, no.
No. Claire had said to him, just speak in English, and he carried on speaking in French, just that way that lads do. He's just trying to have a laugh, I think. And he carried on speaking French. And then she told him that he was annoying her. And then Gerald told her that they'd been going out for 4 years. And when I watched this scene, when he said that they'd been going out for 4 years, Claire actually looks quite disappointed by that milestone. And then Claire and Gerald were in Ray's Calf. Ray, obviously played by Kelly George, a proper Grange Hill legend. Everyone says that Kelly was just the nicest fella. Basically, like an absolute legend, just the nicest fella. But there's a bit where they're in the cafe, and Gerald was like really rude and quite snobby to Ray about the cafe, and said that they wouldn't be seen dead eating there. And so they went to the cinema, because obviously it was date night for Claire and Gerald. So they went to the cinema, and when they got there, the film had already started, and Gerald wouldn't go in to see it, but Claire said she was, and he said, suit yourself. So she said she would, and told him she didn't want to go out with him anymore, and went to watch the film on her own. And you're like, yeah, go on, go on. Because obviously it was the mid-90s, girl power, all that. So obviously Claire was right at the forefront of that, standing up. She didn't need that weird. Because he loved himself, didn't he? He absolutely loved himself, Gerald. And when you watch it, you're thinking, how have you got to go to Grange Hill and not one of the other, like the posher schools around?
Well, yeah, perhaps we shouldn't have been there. Do you know what I mean? He was certainly not in the right area.
But then the next time we see them, Gerald asked Claire what they were doing that night. And Claire said, I meant what I said. And Gerald looked like he couldn't believe that he'd been dumped. He really struggled to accept it. He just couldn't accept that Claire didn't want to see him anymore. And then, like we mentioned earlier, Dennis had the accident, and Claire offered to help him catch up with the work that he'd missed from the accident. And she was going to his house, and we see Claire leave her house, but Gerald was waiting for her outside, and he wanted to talk to her, but she didn't want to know, and just said, look, you've got to leave me alone. And Claire told Dennis she'd help him again, because there was loads going on there with Dennis, and Dennis was quite angry and bitter, rightly so, the way he would have been. But Dennis couldn't understand why she wanted to spend time with him. And Claire said, well, now that she split up with Gerald, she had a bit more free time. I've got a bit more free time, basically every night. But Dennis said she could help him as long as she let him buy her a pizza. But Dennis was going out with Lucy. But you got the feeling that something was going to happen with Claire and Dennis at that time, because they were spending that much time together. But were you ever expecting anything to happen between the two characters?
I don't know. I think obviously there was an interest there on both sides, and I think, as you rightly say, Claire sort of didn't find her sort of girl power group. So I think that I think with the breakdown of the relationship with Gerald, I think seeing somebody else sort of in need as well, and it sort of it worked both ways. I think obviously Claire was wanting to make friends and couldn't quite find her person, so obviously she gravitated to Dennis, but obviously would I suppose boy-girl dynamics, obviously everyone always assumes that they are obviously there's something more to it, but obviously for Claire and Dennis, we were just mutual platonic friends, and I think whether or not there was ever going to be, I don't know, but certainly in my time in Grange Hill there wasn't. So
okay, this didn't happen very often in Grange Hill. It was Claire's birthday, and Claire wanted to do something for her birthday. So Jessica suggested that she have a party. Can you remember where she suggested having the party?
Wasn't it Ray's?
In Ray's Cafe, in the Arches,
And do you know what? The thing I hate about that whole party, I just hated the outfit.
Right.
I call that dress that they made me wear for that party the tele-testing card, because honestly, it was awful, with a turquoise cardigan. I couldn't have had more colours on, and no wonder none of the girls like me.
Yeah. I've got to be honest. As a lad with no fashion sense, I genuinely didn't notice that at all.
I think it still scarred me, and I remember also when you sort of leave Grange Hill, there's do you want any of your costumes? I was like, no, thank you. What about this? No, definitely not that.
Brilliant. Okay, so they have the party in the cafe, and Claire was having a good night, and then Gerald turned up and gave her a present, but Claire said, look, you shouldn't be here. The other thing that Claire was involved with was the school magazine, and Jessica wanted Claire to interview Dennis about his accident, because Jessica wanted the magazine to be like just 17 or something like that, more than just a school magazine. And Claire didn't think that she should do the interview. Obviously, the way Claire's relationship was with Dennis, she knew a lot more about him and the way he was feeling than a lot of other people did. And quite rightly so, she was saying, this isn't the right thing to be doing. But she asked him, and he did agree to do it, much to Dudley's annoyance. So they held the interview, and as we said earlier on, Dennis was really, really bitter about what had happened to him, which, as a 17-year-old lad, you're going to be, aren't you? You know what I mean? If you think, like, you know, you haven't done anything yet, and everything you're probably planning on doing has been taken away. But it was a really, really awkward interview. And when you watch the scene, it comes across that it's really, really awkward as well. Claire didn't really want to do it. And in the end, Dennis, because of the way he was, came up with some questions himself and told Claire how he was really feeling about it. And he got really angry and was shouting at Claire. And like I say, when you watch it, you just think, yeah, I'm not surprised that he's done that, because he starts going on about his sex life and what's going to happen to him in the future and all sorts. And you just think, yeah, like I've just said there, he's a 17-year-old lad, and his life, basically what he was expecting, isn't going to be like that anymore. And again, that was done really, really well as well. But on this magazine, the girls were looking at Polaroids for the centerfold. So if you remember that. And there's a scene where they were all looking at these Polaroids. And can you remember what you were all doing when you were looking at these Polaroids?
It doesn't jump out of my mind, so I'd refresh.
I'm not so sure if this scene could be filmed nowadays. I know a lot of the time they say they wouldn't get away with that on Grange Hill. You couldn't get away with that. You couldn't, and it's a lot of the time it's about the language that they're using. But there's like 7 or 8 girls looking at these Polaroids of different lads, and they're saying it was kiss or throw. Basically, you know, would you throw this one away or would you kiss them? And they're saying kiss or throw, but basically they were saying throw to nearly everyone on there. And then they got to this one where they said throw as they're passing it around, throw. And it got to Claire, and Claire looked at it for ages until she suddenly realised that everyone was staring at her. And so she said throw as well, just to fit in. But in the next scene, we saw Claire talking to the lad who'd been on the photograph, and it was a lad called Dave. And he's one of those characters who you see in the background quite a lot for a couple of series. And you see her talking to Dave for a while, and he's about to ask her out, and then Jessica interrupted them, and you just think, oh, like, and to me, that's one of those things that happens so often at school. You think someone's going to ask someone out, or someone's about to ask someone out, and then someone comes along and interrupts them. He did eventually ask her out. Can you remember what it was he asked Claire to do? No,
I honestly cannot remember. I remember Dave, and I remember we did go out, but yeah. No, I can't remember how it actually happened.
So he asked her to go and watch him play cricket.
I hate cricket. That's probably why I do, actually.
Brilliant. But in the meantime, while all this was happening with Dave, Claire had asked Dennis to go shopping with her, arranging to meet him at 4:00. But in the meantime, as I say, she'd gone to watch Dave play cricket and forgot about Dennis until Dudley came and reminded her that she was supposed to go shopping, and she ran to meet Dennis, but he just wants to go home at that point. He'd had enough. And then Claire was like kind of like caught in two minds. She was a bit guilty about things that was happening with Dave because of her friendship with Dennis at the same time, and because of everything Dennis was going through. But she told Jessica that she really liked Dennis as a friend, but she really liked Dave as a boyfriend. But Jessica told her to go for it with Dave. But then nothing really seemed to happen with Dave after that. You just think, oh yeah, this is good. This is going to happen. But then it really, really didn't. And back at a planning meeting for the magazine, Claire tried to argue that what they were doing with the school magazine was far too explicit for a school magazine. She seemed to be the only one trying to talk sense at this point. She said because, it was when you looked at what was going on, it was all like with the centerfold and then with all these stories about snogging and sex and all that. She said the teachers that weren't going to like it. And she was right, because the school magazine was eventually sort of shut down. And Claire said to Jessica, well, I did try and warn you about that. So that then moves us on to series 21. You've probably worked out what year that went on air and when you would have filmed it. I won't remind it because I know, I know you didn't like that earlier on. That series is one of the ones that didn't start with the first day of term. The year sevens were having a caveman day. And Claire and some of the other sixth formers had gone to help out with that. And so we see Claire and Dudley basically out in the woods, putting up the food tokens. But can you remember where that was filmed?
I want to say Hertfordshire,
right.
But don't quote me on that. Like I say, it was a long time ago.
Yeah. And would it have been a case of spending like 2 weeks there doing that one, or?
I think we were only on location for that one because obviously it was all broken down into blocks, and as I recall, that was like four episodes was per block. Right. So I would say it was only, and each block was like 4 weeks. So I'd say we was only on location a week. If I recall,
Okay.
Right.
Yeah.
But I actually have got photos of us when we were filming out there. So
yeah, right. And there's one of my favourite ever scenes in Grange Hill, right, where Claire says they should go back to the base where everyone is, and Dudley says, "Oh, there's no rush. They could sit down and have a chat." And while they're sitting down having this chat, Dudley's saying, he'd often thought about being a caveman. And he asked Claire if she'd ever thought about being a cave woman. And when he says to her, have you ever thought about being a cave woman? Can you remember what Claire's answer was?
I can imagine it was very polite, probably. And yeah, I know what my answer would be.
What she actually said to him was, well, actually, I was planning on going to university.
Very matter of fact.
Yeah. Dudley then said, well, I didn't mean that. I meant, had she ever thought of be living like a cave woman, what it would have been like. And he starts, this is what I love about it. He goes to put his arm around Claire. But then she turns around and said, well, do you mean like cold and hanging and full of lice? And Dudley quickly sort of pulls his arm away because he's trying to create this moment, and Claire's completely oblivious. He then tries to put her arm around her again, but she jumps up because she's heard the noise, and Dudley falls over. And it's just brilliant because it's such an awkward teenage scene where he's there trying to make something happen that clearly isn't going to happen. You know what I mean? And Claire asked him if he'd heard this noise. And he just says, oh, I had other things on my mind. And leading on from that scene where Claire says she's heard the noise, it was when Adam went missing. Adam was one of the year sevens, had gone missing. And Claire was then involved in the search for Adam. And he did eventually sort of turn up with a dog, which turned out to be the animal making the noise that Claire had heard. So even though this little comedy scene earlier on with Dudley trying to make a move, it actually led to this quite a serious storyline then of this kid going missing, because it seemed to go on for a while, the search and stuff. And then you mentioned earlier on about Joanna, played by Fiona Wade, and her descent into alcoholism. There was a bit where there was a karaoke at Ray's Cafe. And again, this is where that scene, that storyline really came to a head. But I have to say, we saw and heard Nathan singing. We saw and heard Colin singing. And we saw and heard Joanna singing. But Claire didn't. Was that your choice?
I think if they probably heard me singing and thought, no, we can't do that. No, I mean, Fiona was an amazing singer. Yeah. So, yeah, naturally. So not me, unfortunately. I wouldn't say that was my forte, but I don't think I had a choice, but perhaps maybe they did hear me sing.
I mean, because it is quite shocking, that scene, because as you say there, like Fiona's voice is tremendous, and she's there singing "Everybody Hurts," and it's brilliant. And then obviously she falls over and starts shouting and stumbles out and ends up sleeping in the bins that at the end of that episode. And it was the sort of, like I say, it was the head. It brought that storyline to a head. But again, like Joanna then that came to talk to the other sixth formers about what she was going through and what she was planning on doing. And again, that's a really tense scene, like the one in the bar earlier on with those lads. And again, would the atmosphere have changed, or was it be a case of, look, we're all mates together, let's just get on with it and get it done?
Yeah, I think that, there's a sort of, for anyone sort of coming in to do a challenging scene, there's that sort of respect for everybody.
Yeah.
And you take their lead, really.
Yeah.
You sort of follow what they need to do in order to get to the scene. So, and obviously we were all very professional. So there was a lot of sort of camaraderie, maybe jokes outside, but once the director sort of got us on set, you had to do a job, and that's the most important thing to remember. You were being paid.
Yeah.
Whilst it was a great job and very much fun, it is a paid job. Like any work, you gotta deliver, haven't you?
But there wouldn't be much corpsing going on in a scene like that.
I'd say there was a couple of bloopers. I mean, I was very famous for coming in and not using the character name.
Right? Yeah.
Come on, Alan. And they'd be like, "My name's Dennis." I was right. Yeah, that's right. So that was probably my biggest sort of faux pas in on sort of the after the party at the end of the year where they'd play it all. And I was honestly, I was just shown all the time calling everybody by their real name as opposed to their character name. So.
Yeah, well, I mean, it doesn't come across in that scene that anyone's doing it. Because there's a very, very famous scene in Grange Hill history, which is the Danny Kendall Memorial back in the 80s. When you watch that scene, you can tell that nearly everyone is laughing in that scene, and they're trying their hardest not to. There's a few stories on this podcast about why that happened and people talking about it, but it's so obvious when you watch it back that everyone is trying their hardest not to laugh on that. Now, that story we've talked earlier on about, Dennis having his accidents, and the biggest storyline for the sixth formers there, other than Joanna's alcoholism, was Dennis getting the compensation and the court case. Now, Claire offered to help Dennis go through his story to make sure he'd be okay, because Claire was planning on studying law at university. And it caused a bit of friction that between Dudley and Dennis, because for whatever reason, Dennis didn't want Dudley at the court, even though he was like his best mate. He didn't want him there, and you never sort of found out why he didn't want him there. And like Dudley didn't like the fact that Dennis hadn't known Claire for that long, and he'd let her go along, and obviously Lucy had to because she was a witness, and obviously Dennis won the claim. Now, can you remember how much he won? Bear in mind, it was the late 90s, and I said this to Alan, it was like the amount that he wins, it just seemed like it would have been such a lot in the late 90s. Like,
no, I cannot remember, so please do refresh.
So he won $500,000, basically.
Wow.
Yeah, exactly.
That'd be nice nowadays.
Yeah. And obviously everyone at school was, talking about what they'd be spending the money on, and they were going out sports cars and all stuff like that. But obviously Claire was being a bit more sensible.
Yeah.
With their ideas, saying, Dennis is going to need that money, for getting older and, modifying his house, all that. And Dennis was obviously still struggling with what was going on, even though he'd won the claim. He was still struggling with what he was going through. And Claire spoke to him and said, like, he needed to be more positive, and he could do anything that he'd wanted. And I love the line of, you need to work with the wheelchair, not against it. Was there, like, the line that she gave, man. You know, like it sounds like a massive cliche, but it's something I'd not thought about before. Like that, a phrase for someone who is in a wheelchair. You need to work with it, not against it. And so from that, can you remember what Dennis then decided he was going to do?
Probably something not that Claire would approve of,
Right.
I should imagine. but no, I can't quite
So
remember.
he decided he was going to go to Australia on like a trekking holiday for wheelchair users. And he was talking to her about the trip and how he'd need to get fitter. And he asked Claire if she fancied working out with him. But can you remember what Claire said to him when he asked her this?
I was probably, what, did I use the university line again?
No, not this time. No, she said that she didn't want to end up like a female version of Arnold Schwarzenegger. Was what she said. But Dennis said, well, I don't know. If you had a few muscles on you, I could probably quite fancy you. She also said that she'd help Dennis prepare, for the test, his test for going to Australia. And this is where we saw sort of like Lucy's jealous side, because at this time, Dennis and Lucy weren't going out. But Lucy was like sort of really angry about just think about the friendship between the two of them. And she was saying Claire was being really irresponsible because she was setting Dennis up to fail, basically. And when he did fail, it would all be Claire's fault. And that nearly happened because the night before Dennis's interview, he took everyone out in a limo to a club, and Dennis got drunk and hung over and never went to his interview. So Claire and Rachel, obviously Rachel played by Francesca Martinez, they then took him to the cafe again. Obviously the cafe became the focal point where Carol from the trekking company was, and she gave Dennis a load of grief about not going to the interview. So Dennis then eventually rearranged his interview, and the series ended with a party for Dennis, like a going away party. And Gerald was at the party, but with his new girlfriend. And Dave was also at the party as well.
Did he have a girlfriend as well? Yeah. And Claire was all single and alone.
I think he was quite single there. I think Claire and Dave might have got together that night. But Dennis did say at the party he didn't get the job, but they were still letting him go to Australia as a trainee. And I always mention those scenes where, they go out into the nightclub or they are having a party, get the thing about getting all dressed up and doing all stuff like that. Adds a little bit of realism to sixth form, because that's what my sixth form experience was. I've said it loads of times on here. You were in school all week, but then you all met up on the Saturday nights. You all went out.
I was actually at sixth form whilst doing Grange Hill, and I didn't do very well at my A levels because obviously trying to spend sort of time at both. But yeah, I can certainly vouch for that. Is definitely what sixth formers do.
We used to go to a club not too far away from where I live now. It's a Sports Direct now, but anyway, we used to go there every Saturday. Everyone had their own little spec. You knew where to find everyone as well from school. Everyone had their own little spots in like I say, that must have been great for you, getting to just to get dressed up as well and not be in your usual sixth form attire. I know you've said you didn't really like what Claire wore anyway.
I did like that outfit though. I did like the one they dressed me in for the party. It was lovely, like black sequin number, and I think I kept that one actually.
Brilliant, yeah, excellent. But we never saw Claire again after that. So how did you feel about having to leave?
I think, like, compared to some of the other characters that had been in it a lot longer, for me personally, we did keep in contact, and you end up sort of, because obviously you film sort of 6 to 7 months before it airs, so you end up getting back together when it's sort of like you do a bit of publicity around when it's being aired. So for me personally, I think it was great being in Grange Hill, but all good things come to an end.
Yeah.
Which you sort of know when you're joining. You sort of know your life expectancy. You know, if you're lucky to continue, and Claire did actually, you know, start sixth form and finish sixth form. So, you know, she saw her journey through. So unless she appeared back as a teacher and later in years, but obviously that wouldn't have followed in her law sort of dreams. But, you know, for me personally, I think it was easier for me because I'd sort of come in late into the sort of cohort of my sort of year group.
Yeah.
But, you know, great memories. And, you know, as I say, most of us are still sort of in some form of contact, usually by social media, really.
Yeah. Okay. Now, whenever I'm putting an episode of the podcast out, for the week before, I'll put picture clues out online on social media. And the first person that guesses who the guest is going to be gets to ask a question to the following guest. So I've got a question for you here from someone called Ben. And I think it's quite an easy question. It's quite a nice one. He just asks, what was your best or your favourite moment from being on Grange Hill?
I think the moment you mentioned where Dennis took us out to a nightclub, that was quite fun to film because it was Aquarius, which was in Old Street, and it had a swimming pool in it.
Right. Yeah.
So in that respect, it was, you know, whilst you were working, it was quite fun. And actually, I didn't live very far from there, so it was all, you know. So a lot of my friends were extras actually in that scene. So for me, being able to share, you know, with friends that, you know, came and played as part of the background, that was quite nice, you know. Then to, you know, be on Grange Hill, albeit, you know.
Yeah.
So for me, that was one of the biggest moments that I sort of, you know, I think the rap parties were always good at the end of, you know, end of rap parties. But yeah, always got very fond memories of being in, you know, Elstree. I think the biggest thing about Elstree was obviously there was a lot of other stuff going on there as well. So you know, you had Topper Pops and EastEnders obviously filmed in the same thing. So you also bumped into them. So that was always good. But yeah, I can't think of any other memories.
Yeah, right. Okay. I mean, you're saying there about the nightclub and stuff. I love watching them sort of early to mid to late 90s scenes where they are out, because that was when I was going out. You know what I mean? And you hear the music, and the music sparks a memory off and stuff. And is it weird though trying to be like acting in a loud nightclub when there's no actual music getting played at that time?
Well, they play you. They do play you sort of like 10 seconds of music, so you sort of like you get your. But then they always put on something. I remember they put on Kung Fu Fighting. Well, obviously when they put on Kung Fu Fighting, you start you know that, and they're like, just remember, it may not be this music that says, so please don't Kung Fu Fight. You can't help it, can you?
No.
You know. So yeah, I think it certainly is not as joyous as it looks when it actually is ahead, because it is pure silence.
Yeah. Brilliant. Okay. So we'll talk about what you did after Grange Hill, because obviously you carried on acting for a while, and you were in something I noticed called The Scold's Bride, 2 episodes of that. And I mean, the cast in that was like, you know, quite phenomenal. Like Virginia McKenna and Miranda Richardson and Paul Brook and Sudi Style and Hugh Bonneville, who everyone who I've interviewed seems to have worked with Hugh Bonneville at some point in their life. But like, did you get to film any scenes with any of those people?
My scenes were pretty much with Douglas Hodge, which is another great actor.
Yeah.
But obviously you get to meet everybody again at rap parties, read-throughs and stuff like that. So yeah, you do have that moment where you sort of have that shock moment. So no, very enjoyable.
And you were in Virtual Sexuality, which I'm only mentioning because quite a lot of Grange Hill, well, I'll say there's a few Grange Hill alumni in there, like Joe Povey was in there and Emma Pearson.
Emma Pearson. Ironically, I'd just finished Grange Hill and then went on to do Virtual Sexuality, and then she was just starting Grange Hill, and I was like, oh my god, you know Aidan, you know, so you sort of, that was it. It does feel like the acting world, once you're in it, it's so small, you know.
Yeah, And
And then I also worked with Emma Pearson in Thailand when we did Stranded.
wow.
So again, small world.
Yeah. Carl Saxton Pizzi was in that as well. Carl Pizzi, Carl's been on here as well. Ruth Rendell, mysteries again. Grange Hill, loads there. Vince Brimble, who played Julia's dad in Grange Hill, but Martino was in that, and Laura Sadler as well. And then you were in the 1999 version of Oliver Twist. Mm-hmm. And I know I've just mentioned the cast for The Scold's Bride, but the cast list in this version of Oliver Twist is unbelievable. It's like Mark Warren, Julie Walters, Annette Crosby, Liz Smith, Alan Armstrong, Trigger's in there.
And I just say he played Mr. Sowerberry. So the funny thing is obviously when you film, obviously it's very tight schedules, and it was really funny. So I got picked up and they said, "Well, really sorry, Miss Murphy, we're going to have to pick somebody up en route to the airport." So because it was filmed in Prague.
Right.
And ultimately we were en route to the airport and we stopped at this house and Trigger gets in the cab. You know, do you know what? I did do the most embarrassing thing. I thought, I've got to do it. I just went, all right, Dave. You know, you just like, it had that moment, human nature. You know, Roger Lloyd Pack, Trigger, got in my car to go. And then obviously he was playing Mr. Sowerberry, which obviously was, my scenes were all with him. So I don't think I got the cool factor. And I think he probably was quite annoyed with me, but hey ho, that's my saddest moment.
But also like Keira Knightley was in that, and Andy Serkis as well, Isla Fisher. It's unreal. I mean, you've just said that about Roger Lloyd Pack. Did you ever get starstruck with any of the others? Like,
to tell you the truth, Grange Hill was my springboard because I did go from strength to strength, and I did some amazing. And like you say, I've forgotten half the people that I've worked with. But yes, you do walk into a room and you do have those moments, and you're like, oh my god, and you do, you have to get it out of your system. Like I say, I know that he was just like, all right, Dave, and I just like, oh, I've done now, thank you. And then you think you've got to travel for like an hour and a half to Heathrow with him in the car. I mean, I perhaps should have done it maybe at the end.
Did he speak to you much in the cab after that?
I think he's like, I'm going to go through my lines, the mad redhead in the car with me. Wait till I speak to production on this one.
Brilliant.
No, he was good.
Brilliant. And I've just noticed there, Ian Robertson was in that as well. Ian
from Grange Hill.
Played one of the best bullies Grange Hill's ever had, one of the most sly and vindictive bullies Grange Hill's ever had.
I love the guy. I love Ian.
Yeah. And you did the bill. 3 episodes, 3 different characters.
Yeah, don't credit me now.
And I have to ask as well, you were in Last Orders, and again,
now you're going to talk about the amazing cast.
Michael Caine, Bob Hoskins, Tom Courtenay, David Hennons, Helen Mirren, Ray Winston. But you played the younger
Kelly Riley. I mean, you've got to talk about Kelly Riley. And ultimately,
you played the younger version of Joan, who was played by Meg Winowen. Now, when you play the younger version of someone else, do you work with that person to like copy or mannerisms or anything like that?
Well, obviously, the younger version of David Hemmings was his son. So obviously he's my husband in it. And the director basically it was one of the most amazing projects because, as you say, it was a fabulous cast. We had to watch them. So we got to actually be on set when we weren't actually filming to watch the older versions because obviously a lot of it is through flashback of obviously, and it was all sort of set around sort of a pub was sort of like the flashback. And, Michael Caine, I mean, he was a patron of Anna Scher. So I had been in Michael Caine's presence, but actually working with him, he's just the most amazing storyteller. Like he'd just be standing there telling, and he just captivates you with the stories. And as I say, being in presence of, acting greatness was amazing. And as I say, we got to spend a lot of time watching while they did all the work. So yes, that was pretty special. And, you know, you get all your signed sort of pictures at the end at the wrap party and stuff. And I've still got that. That one was very close.
Rightly so. Yeah, definitely. Okay, you've mentioned Stranded with Emma Pearson, but also Bonnie Wright was in that as well.
Yeah.
And then you did a short film called Spin with Aidan.
Aidan, Julian Morris, and I mean Julian Morris is in Hollywood now, isn't it? And him as well.
And then you were in Byron, Johnny Lee Miller, Philip Glenister, Vanessa Redgrave.
She specially requested me, actually.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
Brilliant. And then you were in a couple more, like Silent Witness and Blitz as well. But then that's where it sort of stops there. So can I ask why you haven't worked since then?
I was 24 at the time, and Blitz was my last job in Poland.
Right.
I actually wasn't together long with my now husband.
Right.
It got to a point for me, and like I say, I'd had amazing time.
Uh-huh.
And I think the crux point was for me, it was when reality TV had massively come in, and I'd managed to go to an award show, and actually the best drama, like the best TV program was was it X Factor or Pop Idol? It was Pop Idol at the time.
Right.
And it was a massive change in the industry. So, you know, it was getting harder. And for me, you know, you've just gone through some of the projects that I worked on. And for me, you could never have a normal life because you were always waiting. Byron, I had to cancel my holiday to actually film. You know, you could never plan anything when you're acting because, you know, you get a recall and you're like, oh my God, this could be it. So it was really hard to be normal, I think. Right. And I got to the point, with acting, it's like you do a good job. It's not like natural progression. You don't go on and do, you know, you don't progress up a ladder. You do a great job, but then you could not work for a year.
Yeah.
You know, and it's very hard to have nice things like buy a house, have holidays and plan things in the acting industry. It's sort of like you have to put your life on hold, really, and drop everything to do it. And I'd got to a point where I actually wanted normality, really. Uh-huh. So I felt like I'd go out on a high, you know, gave notice to my agent, and I haven't looked back, really. Yes. You know, happily married now with my then boyfriend, but now husband.
Yeah. And all right then. So what do you do now then?
Gosh, I work in the glamorous world of facility management at the Houses of Parliament.
Wow.
So, yeah. So now I act all the time, you know, pretending to work with lovely people all the time.
Brilliant. But have you always done that then since you left the acting?
Actually, yes, because it was something that I sort of jobbed at whilst pursuing acting.
Right, I get you.
I was very lucky at the time. My employer said, you know, I could, you know, go off to auditions at a drop of a hat. So I did it part-time while I was acting, and then basically decided that, well, give back. So lucky enough, I don't know if it was my dream as a child, though, but here I am earning my living.
Brilliant. And obviously, you've just said there you do act still, because obviously there's going to be people there you don't agree with. There's going to be people there that you don't like. And I suppose for a lot of people act all the time in their work, don't they? But I think it's a little bit more high profile, possibly for you.
I've got to remain politically neutral, you know. So that can be, you know.
Brilliant. Okay, and you've mentioned there that you are still in touch with some of the cast. We've mentioned Alan. Who else are you in touch with then?
Lorraine, Francesca, Amy. Who else from Grange Hill? No, I think that's pretty much it that we've sort of, you know, kept in contact really with.
Yeah.
But, you know, it is a small world, and you do tend to sort of bump into people, and, you know, and I think social media now makes it very easy to keep in contact and see what other people are doing. You think, oh, do you know what? I'm going to go along and support them and have done, you know. So that's what I love about social media from that angle.
Brilliant. Okay, so we are coming towards the end of the interview, Tracey, and I've got the same few questions that I always ask everyone at the end of every episode. So recently, over the last couple of years, there's been talk of a Grange Hill movie in the works. What do you think of the idea of a Grange Hill movie?
I don't know. I mean, I think if you look at everything now, do people want to watch drama about a school anymore? I don't know. If it was on the edge and it was cutting edge and it was dealing with the real issues that actually do happen within schools, then great, you know, because that was what it was always good at doing, pushing the boundaries. I don't know. When you say movie, I just think glamour, and, you know, I don't think of Grange Hill being the most glamorous thing, but, you know, it'd be like you saying EastEnders is going to have a movie. You know, it's not. It's about real life, isn't it? Day to day, and I don't know.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, the thing for me is, I think Phil Redmond's involved. He's not going to let it be something he doesn't want it to be. And I think if it was to ever go that way, that it was something he didn't want it to be, he'd pull it, or he'd just take his name away from it, wouldn't he? You know.
He would.
But if you were asked, would we see the return of Claire Sullivan?
No, probably. I would. Well, never say never, but no. That, my acting days, I can't even know how I learnt lines now. You know, my memory is useless. So I'd probably get sacked on the first day.
Okay, so we mentioned about the fact that, you know, you were a fan of Grange Hill. So, other than Claire Sullivan, who was your favourite character in Grange Hill?
I think Tegs. I think Sean Maguire. I'm sorry. I thought him. I like the Justin and Tegs relationship as well. So yeah, I think I had a little crush on old Sean Maguire.
And and if you couldn't have played Claire, which other character would you like to have played?
Gosh, who would I have liked to have played? What, in my year group or
any at all?
I don't know. I always like Melissa Wilkes. Is you know, who doesn't? And I think they have that whole storyline with the Zamo. So that would be my role if I had to choose.
Well, can I just ask there, if when Melissa and Lee, were they around at Anna Shares when you were?
Ironically, me and Melissa did a Bernard Butler music video together. Right. So yes, I mean, to be fair, they weren't like actively there when I was there, but I do know both by association friends. Yeah, you know, I mean, John Drummond actually is a good friend, but that was not through Grange Hill, but through Anna Shares.
Oh right, yeah, because I like John was my Christmas special. Just gone, and he said he was at Anna. He still went to Anna Shares for a very long time. He said well,
I saw John last year, so through an Anna Share sort of event. So
brilliant. I love him. He's brilliant, John. I actually interviewed him in Ziggy Greaves' house.
Oh wow! Oh, I'll tell you what, I bet that was quite funny.
Honestly, it was one of the best days of my life. Honestly, it was just a pair of them together. Brilliant. Okay, then, Tracey. So the final question: why do you think there is still such affection for Grange Hill?
I think it's been through the years, and I think, like I say, you know, your parents know about it. Well, my parents did. And even my kids even know about Grange Hill, whilst it wasn't being aired and things like that. So I think it was on for such a long period that regardless of whether you watched it currently or not, I think 100% it felt like I don't know. You could relate to it, I suppose, is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, definitely.
And it pushed boundaries. It was cutting edge. Children's drama.
Yeah.
There's not many children's drama that have come close since.
No.
And that's why people, I think, hold it dearly, because, not much TV, even now, tells you the truth, does it? No. Of how it actually is.
Yeah.
And people appreciate that and respect it.
Yeah. I mean, I've said before, like, a lot of parents didn't let their kids watch it because of what it covered. But I think that's the reason why my parents did let me watch it, was because of what it covered. Because it didn't sugarcoat stuff, did it? It told you what was happening and why it was happening and how it was happening. So yeah, like that. I completely agree with you on that one. But no, well, Tracey, thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you.
It's been great talking to you. Eventually, because
No, I know. I'm sorry.
I'm gonna be honest. You've been more reliable than some. But for people listening, this is the third time we've tried to do this week. Yeah. We won't bore you with details, but yeah. But no, honestly, thank you so much. It has been brilliant talking.
It was my pleasure. Thank you.
So yeah, so thank you so much, and once again, thanks to Alan for pressuring you.
No, there's no pressure. It was like, you just got to do this. I said, Alan, I can't find it.
He kept messaging me saying, "I've messaged it. I'm going to get it to do it. I have messaged it. I'm going to get it." But no, honestly, thank you so much. It has been great talking to you and listening to your experience at the time on the program and all those brilliant things that you did afterwards as well. So honestly, thank you so much. And to anyone that's listening, I'll speak to you next time. Cheers. Thanks. Bye-bye.
Thank you.